What would you do if you found out your HOA was stealing from you? At first, I thought it was just another pointless fee increase. Nothing unusual, just another email from the HOA announcing that our dues were going up again. It was the fifth increase in 2 years, and every time, the explanation was vague: community maintenance, neighborhood improvements, necessary upgrades. Yet somehow, the neighborhood never actually improved. The clubhouse pool had been closed for over a year, supposedly under scheduled repairs. The security cameras at the entrance had been coming soon for months. And the playground? One of the swings had been broken for almost a year, the chain rusted from sitting in the sun. So where was all the money going? I stared at the email, feeling that familiar frustration creep in. My wife, Lauren, walked into the kitchen, still in her robe, reaching for the coffee pot. She took one look at my face and sighed. Another increase? Yep. I turned the screen toward her. They're just making up numbers at this point. She stirred her coffee, eyes narrowing as she scanned the email. We should ask for a breakdown. See exactly what we're paying for. I exhaled. You really think they'll give us one? Lauren gave me that look, the one that meant she wasn't letting this go. If they don't, that's even more reason to start digging. And just like that, a simple conversation over morning coffee turned into something bigger. That was the moment it all started. The moment I unknowingly stepped onto a path that would uncover one of the biggest HOA scams our town had ever seen. I decided to go to the next HOA meeting, something I had avoided for years. Honestly, I never saw the point. The board had been running things for over a decade, and they made it clear that homeowner concerns weren't their priority. But this time, I had a goal. I wanted answers. The meeting was held in the community center, a small, dimly lit room lined with metal folding chairs. A handful of residents showed up, mostly retirees who still believed their voices mattered and a few newcomers who hadn't yet learned that the HOA wasn't interested in feedback. At the front of the room sat the board, a group of 5 people who had held on to their positions like lifers in Congress. And at the head of the table was Brad Whitmore, HOA president. Brad was the kind of guy who smiled too much but never actually listened. He spoke in polished, rehearsed phrases designed to shut down questions without answering them. And when I raised my hand during the open floor discussion, I saw that smile tighten just a little. I was wondering if we could see a detailed breakdown of where our dues are going, I said as calmly as I could. Brad's fingers tightened around his pen. Well, we post our financial summary online every quarter. Everything is accounted for. I checked, I countered. It's just a broad breakdown. We see maintenance fees, $120,000, but no explanation of what that covers. And since our dues have increased 5 times in 2 years, I think we deserve a little more detail. Murmurs spread through the room. I wasn't the only one who had noticed. Several neighbors nodded, and I could see some of them turning toward the board, waiting for an answer. Brad's smile froze, and he glanced at Denise Caldwell, the treasurer. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding eye contact. We can certainly put together a more detailed report, Brad finally said, his voice smooth but tense. That was a lie. I knew it the moment he said it. They weren't planning to give us anything. And that's when I made a decision: if they weren't going to tell us where our money was going, I was going to find out myself. I didn't waste any time. The moment I got home from the HOA meeting, I sat down at my laptop and started digging. If Brad and the board weren't going to hand over the details, I'd find them myself. The first thing I pulled up was the quarterly financial summary they had posted online. Just like I remembered, it was a broad, useless breakdown, a few general categories like landscaping, security upgrades, and maintenance, with numbers that seemed to climb every year without any clear explanation. But something wasn't adding up. Under landscaping services, there was a $35,000 charge for the last quarter alone. That seemed odd considering our landscaping consisted of a few scattered flower beds and patches of grass that were rarely mowed on schedule. Curious, I looked up the name of the vendor, Greenway Landscaping Solutions. There was just one problem. It didn't exist. No website, no business address, no phone number. A quick search through state business records showed nothing under that name. I tried looking up the security company that had supposedly installed our neighborhood's long overdue security cameras. Nothing. I checked the contractor hired for the clubhouse repairs, dissolved 3 years ago. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. They were paying vendors that didn't exist. Or worse, they were funneling our dues into fake companies. That realization hit me like a truck. This wasn't just a case of mismanagement. This was fraud. I knew I needed a second opinion, someone with real experience. So the next morning, I walked 2 houses down and knocked on Frank Mitchell's door. Frank was a retired accountant, sharp as a knife despite being in his 70s. If anyone could make sense of these numbers, it was him. When I laid out what I had found, Frank's expression darkened as he skimmed through the financial reports. He barely said a word, just flipping page after page, frowning deeper with each one. After a long pause, he exhaled and leaned back in his chair. "You're not wrong," he finally said, tapping a finger against the paper. "These payments? They're classic laundering tactics. Fake expenses. Falsified vendor names. This is intentional. Somebody's moving money." I swallowed hard. "So, what do we do?" Frank laced his fingers together. "First, we need past records. If this has been going on for years, it'll show a pattern. But I'll tell you right now, they're not going to just hand them over." He was right. When I formally requested older records from the HOA, I got a response within hours, filled with excuses about privacy concerns and system upgrades that had supposedly erased past financial reports. It was a load of garbage. If they weren't hiding something, they would have been more than happy to provide the information. And then came the first unexpected bombshell. Buried in the current records, Frank spotted a $50,000 transaction labeled as a consulting fee paid to a firm called Caldwell Community Strategies. A little digging revealed exactly what I feared. It was a shell company controlled by Denise Caldwell, the HOA treasurer. She had been funneling HOA money to herself. Lauren's face turned red when I told her. "So we've been paying for this woman's vacation fund?" "More like her credit card bill," I muttered. "I bet every consulting fee is just money getting funneled straight to her." I sent everything we had to Eric Malone, the journalist. He responded in under 10 minutes. "This is big. Give me an hour." I wasn't even done reeling from that revelation when the second bombshell hit. 2 days after I confronted the HOA about the missing records, I received a legal notice in the mail. My stomach sank when I opened it. It was a lien notice. The HOA was claiming I had unpaid fees and that, unless I paid immediately, they would begin foreclosure proceedings on my house. I nearly crushed the paper in my fist. I had never missed a payment. I pulled up my bank statements just to be sure, and there it was, every single payment, made on time. This wasn't a mistake. This was retaliation. I stormed over to Frank's house and found him already holding his own copy of a lien notice. "They hit me too," he said, shaking his head. "And 3 other people I know who spoke up at the meeting." This was worse than fraud, this was extortion. I knew I had 2 choices, pay the bogus fees and stay quiet, or fight back and expose them for what they were. And I wasn't about to back down. I wasn't the only one under attack. By the end of the week, at least 7 homeowners had received bogus fines, liens, or violation notices. The pattern was clear: Every single one of them had spoken out at the last HOA meeting or had privately voiced concerns about the rising fees. This wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about shutting people up. I knew we needed to go public before things got worse. Eric Malone, the journalist, had already started digging into the HOA's financial mess, but now he had something even bigger, evidence that the board was using legal threats to intimidate homeowners. When I told him about the fraudulent liens, his response was immediate. This just went from financial fraud to racketeering. We need to expose them before they push someone into foreclosure. But before Eric could even publish his report, something even worse surfaced. One night, around midnight, I noticed a dark sedan parked across the street from my house. I didn't think much of it at first, until I saw a second car, idling near Frank's driveway. Then, a third, slowly rolling past Mark Dempsey's home. It wasn't a coincidence. I stepped outside and walked toward the nearest vehicle. The driver, a man in an unmarked uniform with no visible ID, was holding a clipboard and a camera, snapping pictures of my house. I knocked on his window. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer. He simply looked at me, lowered his camera, and drove away. I called Frank. "Do you see them?" "Oh, I see them," he said. "And I don't like what it means." By morning, we had confirmation of what we feared. Mark Dempsey, one of the board members who had privately confessed that even he was starting to question Brad's leadership, told us the truth. The HOA had hired a private security firm to conduct compliance checks. That was a lie. This wasn't security. This was organized intimidation. They weren't checking for violations. They were watching us, photographing our homes, and making sure we knew they were there. Eric's article was published that same night. HOA hired private security team to target homeowners who questioned finances. The response was immediate and explosive. The HOA board tried to deny everything, claiming they had simply hired a team to ensure compliance with community standards. But the evidence was damning. We had photos, videos, eyewitness accounts. The intimidation tactics were undeniable. And then the next bombshell dropped. An anonymous email landed in my inbox. No subject line. No message. Just one single leaked document attached. I opened it. It was an email chain between Brad Whitmore and a city zoning official. I read in disbelief as the emails laid out a clear bribery scheme. In exchange for pushing through new HOA policies, ones that strengthened the board's control and made it nearly impossible for homeowners to challenge them, Brad had approved payments labeled as community improvement funds directly into a fake charitable foundation run by the official. Brad had been buying legal protection for years. I sent the document to Eric immediately. The moment he published it, all hell broke loose. Brad went silent. The HOA board stopped responding to homeowner complaints. Panic had set in. For the first time, they were the ones on the defensive. And then, in an act of sheer desperation, they tried to frame me. I woke up the next morning to a violation notice taped to my front door. The accusation? Vandalizing HOA property. Apparently, at some point during the night, someone had spray-painted HOA thieves across the community clubhouse. And the HOA was claiming I did it. It was almost laughable. Almost. Until I realized they were using it as justification to escalate legal action against me. They weren't just trying to intimidate me. They were trying to ruin me. But they had made a fatal mistake. Because I had security cameras. I pulled up my footage and there it was, two masked figures creeping around my house late at night, likely planting evidence. They weren't just corrupt. They were criminals. And now? I had everything I needed to take them down. I didn't waste a second. The moment I had the security footage, I sent it straight to Eric Malone, the journalist. Within an hour, he was on the phone, his voice sharp with excitement. They just handed you the smoking gun. This isn't just HOA corruption anymore, this is outright criminal behavior. By that evening, the article was live. HOA board caught framing homeowner after corruption allegations, security footage exposes the setup. It exploded online. Neighbors who had once stayed quiet finally started speaking out. The comment section filled with homeowners from other states sharing similar horror stories, bogus fines, sudden foreclosures, HOA officials abusing power. But the real storm hit at the next HOA meeting. By the time I arrived at the community center, the parking lot was overflowing. People who had never attended a single meeting before were there, holding copies of the article, printed violation notices, even screenshots of the security footage. The usual few rows of metal folding chairs were packed, and more people stood along the walls. Brad Whitmore sat at the front table, flanked by Denise Caldwell and the rest of the board, his usual smug confidence nowhere to be seen. The room was buzzing with anger. The moment the meeting started, hands shot up. "What do you have to say about the illegal liens?" someone shouted. "Where's our money, Brad?" another neighbor yelled. Brad tried to deflect, his voice tight and rehearsed. "There have been a lot of exaggerated claims recently, and..." I cut him off. "Oh, you mean the claims backed by financial records? The ones that show you funneled our money into fake companies?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. He hesitated. For the first time, he looked rattled. Then Frank Mitchell stood up, holding up a copy of the leaked bribery email. "Explain this," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Explain why HOA funds were used to pay off a zoning official." "We'll wait." Silence. Denise shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Brad adjusted his tie. They were scrambling. Then the doors at the back of the room swung open. A man in a suit walked in, flanked by two officials. He carried a leather briefcase and a stack of papers. He didn't introduce himself. He simply walked to the front of the room, placed the papers on the table, and looked directly at Brad. "The State Housing Authority is launching an official investigation into the financial activities of this HOA. Effective immediately, we are requesting full access to all financial records, vendor contracts, and legal transactions conducted by this board over the past 5 years." The room erupted. Half the homeowners cheered. Others shouted in anger at the board. Brad's face went pale. Denise looked ready to bolt. Someone in the crowd yelled, "Resign." Another voice, "We demand refunds." It was chaos. Brad stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "This is outrageous. We have done nothing wrong." Frank let out a short, humorless laugh. "Then why are you sweating, Brad?" Before he could respond, the state official continued. "All accounts associated with this HOA are now frozen pending investigation. Any evidence of financial misconduct will be referred for legal prosecution." A collective gasp. Brad tried to regain control. "This is nothing more than a politically motivated..." I didn't let him finish. "Oh, shut up, Brad. You got caught." Laughter. Agreement. The meeting was officially out of his hands. I watched as his entire empire crumbled in real time. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within 48 hours of the state launching its investigation, the forensic accountants began combing through the HOA's financial records. The deeper they dug, the worse it got. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been funneled into shell companies, fake vendor payments, and personal expenses disguised as community maintenance. Every transaction told a story of corruption, vacations, luxury purchases, even personal home renovations, all funded by the very people Brad and his board had been squeezing dry. It didn't take long for board members to start turning on each other. Denise Caldwell resigned immediately, citing health reasons, but everyone knew the truth. Mark Dempsey, the board member who had warned me about the private security firm, saw the writing on the wall and flipped to save himself. In exchange for leniency, he handed over emails, bank statements, and recorded conversations that proved Brad had been orchestrating the scam for years. Then came the final blow. A class action lawsuit was filed against the HOA board, demanding restitution for years of fraudulent overcharging and fabricated fees. The state froze the HOA's accounts, and suddenly, Brad was left without the financial backing that had once made him untouchable. 2 weeks later, the inevitable happened. Brad Whitmore was arrested at his home, led out in handcuffs while half the neighborhood stood on their porches watching. His once pristine reputation was reduced to nothing more than a scandal plastered across news headlines. He had ruled the community for years, dismissing concerns, silencing homeowners, and weaponizing the HOA's power for his own gain. And now? Now he was just another fraud caught in the act. With the HOA under state oversight, a new board was elected, one that actually answered to the homeowners. Refunds were issued for the bogus fines. The unjust liens were removed. For the first time in years, the neighborhood was free from the iron grip of a corrupt HOA. Standing in my front yard, watching the last remnants of Brad's empire collapse, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just about my house, my money, or my garden. It was about standing up to the people who think they can control everything just because they have power. Because power unchecked leads to corruption. And if we don't fight back, how many more HOAs like Brad's will keep getting away with it? Have you ever been harassed by an HOA or dealt with a Karen on a power trip? Share your story below. I guarantee you're not alone.